Sige ma'am, i-share mo na po ng pool. You may proceed, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. Governance, change management, architecture. The topics that we're going to discuss is the report about the governance, change management, and the architecture compliance as well. My content is governance, change management, architecture compliance. Governance. But first, we must define kung ano ba at para saan ang governance. So, ang enterprise architecture governance is basically the foundation on how to manage a business. Of course, kasama sa management ang pagkakaroon ng leadership, pati na rin ang kaalaman sa mga aspeto about sa structure ng isang organization in business, a management should know the right direction for them to meet their goals. In line to this, the IT helps also to promote or to boost the strategies na gagamitin sa isang business, or in short, to support for an efficient flow or procedure. This section must be expected, especially in most modern organizations, na mayroong policies na kailangang sundin. Because policies are one of the tools na kinakailangan to succeed and para maging well-guided ang bawat member ng isang organization. For them to understand the standards na meron yung current organization na pinapasukan nila to avoid any issues. Of course, without EA governance, most likely an organization could work but not in the long run, which means there are more than 80% chance to have problems, especially with our operation in the organization doesn't have our governance structure. Kadalasan nangyayari sa isang operation is walang standard process na sinusundan, or basically the knowledge is based from the individual and not work as a team. Conceptually, EA governance is an approach, a series of processes, a cultural orientation, and a set of own responsibilities that ensure the integrity and effectiveness of an organization architectures. So this is an example of context diagram of governance wherein it is a various processes and flows. Like for example, the first phase is the process that carries all the tasks as well with the content wherein both of them will be placed with EA repository that serve as the architecture storage. So there are the guiding principle of EA governance. Independence, accountability, responsibility, fairness. In EA governance, it also have roles and responsibilities to do. For providing leadership, communication, syempre let's say, sa isang project, even nakapag-conduct tayo ng planning, there are times na kailangan ng members na mag-confirm upon doing the project. Kasi ibang planning sa actual work. Envisioning, leading, and guiding the development of overall solution architecture compliance with IT transformation. This implies naman sa IT management, kung tutuusin, they are one of the most important assets sa isang organization kasi they support almost every operations. It is important to understand business areas. Syempre may iba-iba namang operation bawat area na kailangan nating sundin. in our generation, actually parang it's must required to understand how technology works. Syempre po, even your course is not in line with technology, for sure, in the future, we'll probably work with technology as well. Same with the organization, like I've said, IT supports almost every operation. This section is part with the head or lead management roles, where they are the one who decide and control the entire operation. Where we say control mechanism, this is the way how to make an effective and efficient procedure in every business area. Providing solutions, this goes to the other operation where a business must have a backup plans. Let's say the first plan did not work, and the management itself should provide architectural solution and design to a new process, and they will be replaced with the traditional one. Change management. Change management is also part of the EA governance. Technically, this goes to the changes with the business operation system and other asset of the organization that is needed to be changed. For example po, a change in system might require employees to be retained, taking them away from more immediate value and creating tasks. Change management is important, of course, in a business. There will be some percentage of risk to accept upon the deliberation and implementation, wherein it something happened that this change management will support and will be act as an alternative way to proceed the process. Let's say sa isang system, upon the day-to-day operation, nagkaroon ng problema, so at least the management has backup plan to replace the system kaagad-agad and continue with the operation. In large operation, enterprise architecture has long been recognized as an effective mechanism for change management. It facilitates an organization efforts in assessing the impact of change and making recommendation for target states that support business objectives. Enterprise architecture often has been disconnected from business stakeholders as well as the IT projects team assigned to deliver the solution. This disconnect can lead to the EA team suffering from a lack of commitment from the wider organization and through their recommendation as are ignored. Architecture compliance. In architecture compliance, we have two processes. The first one is the architecture function that will manage the enterprise architecture, which include the roles, policies, tasks, areas of work, and more. And the other one is the supporting function, which is the IT governance that will review all the plans made by the architecture functions and proceed with the implementation of each project plans. The goals of an architecture compliance is, of course, to catch errors upon the project's architecture para ma-reduce yung damage and cost sa isang business. Kumbaga, this serves as a warning tool para well-guided ang isang plano at mapabilis ang changes if may makitang issue sa isang ginagawang project. The goals of architecture compliance review include some of all the following. Ensure the application of best practices to architecture work. Provide an overview of the compliance of architecture to mandate enterprise standards. Identify where the standards themselves may require modification. Identify services that are currently application specific but might be provided as part of the enterprise structure. And document strategies for collaborations, resource sharing, and other synergies across multiple architecture teams. Take advantage of advance in technology, identify and communicate significant architecture gaps to product and service providers. Thank you very much, sir, and thank you for listening, classmates.
Okay, to give some additional inputs for this discussion, of course, actually, when we say architecture governance, no, So it is the practice and orientation by which enterprise architecture and other architecture are managed and controlled at an enterprise-wide level. So as our presenter mentioned, no, architecture governance typically does not operate in isolation, but within a hierarchy of governance structures, no, which are particular in the larger enterprise and can include the distinct domains with their own disciplines and processes like corporate governance, technology governance, IT governance, and the architecture governance. Each of these domains of governance may exist at multiple geographic levels, either globally, regionally, and locally within the overall enterprise. The corporate governance is thus a broad topic beyond the scope of enterprise architecture framework such as TOGAP, no, yung diniscuss natin before. These and related subsections are focused on architecture governance, but they describe it in the context of enterprise-wide governance because of the hierarchy of governance structure within which it typically operates, as explained, no, a while ago. So we need to consider in architecture governance to provide an overview of the nature of governance as a discipline in its own right. No? It described the governance context in which architecture governance typically functions within the enterprise. And of course, the architecture governance framework that can be adapted and applied in practice, both of enterprise architecture and some other forms of IT architecture. So when we say there are some characteristics of governance, no? So we have discipline, transparency, independence, accountability, responsibility, and fairness, no? As what our presenter mentioned. So again, architecture governance is the practice, no, by which the enterprise architecture and other architecture are managed and controlled. So in order to ensure that this control is effective within the organization, it is necessary to have a correct organizational structure established to support all governance activities. So it is important for us to have an organizational structure specifically for the architecture governance framework. So it covers, of course, the governance environment, no, the develop, the enterprise continuum at the same time. No, so the architecture governance and corporate politics, no, we need to accept the fact there is a similar between enterprise architecture and architecture in the physical world. So in that politics, no, has an important role to play the acceptance of both architectures. In the real world, it is the actual politics of an environment and comments, no, in commerce. While it is the world of enterprise architecture, a consideration of corporate politics is critical. Because an enterprise architecture imposed without appropriate political backing is bound to fail. No? In order to succeed, the enterprise architecture must reflect the needs of the organization. Because enterprise architecture, if they are not involved in the deployment of business strategy, it must at least have a fundamental understanding of it and of the prevailing business issues facing the organization. It may even be necessary for them to be involved in the system development process and to ultimately own the investment and product selection decisions arising from the implementation of the technology architecture. Then, of course, the key strategic elements of architecture governance strategy that relate particularly to acceptance and success of the architecture within the enterprise, no? While the relevant and applicable in their own right apart from their role of governance and therefore described separately, they also from an integral part of the effective architecture governance strategy, like cross-organizational architecture board, no? It must be established within the backing of top management to oversee the implementation of IT governance strategy. A comprehensive set of architecture principles, no? It should be established to guide, to inform, and to support the way in which an organization sets up about fulfilling its mission through the use of IT and an architecture compliance. No? This will be the strategy should be adapted as specific measures, more than just a statement of policy. No, a while ago I'm asking about the policy to ensure compliance within the architecture, including project impact assessments, formal architecture compliance review process, and possibly including the involvement of the architecture team in the product procurement. So again, the TOGAP document set are designed to use the frames, no? And to address some concern specifically with the documents into secondary index framework, and of course the content list to load a page into the mainframe of the TOGAP value or the TOGAP documentation. Okay, so I think that's it for the governance and enterprise architecture.